Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the John Doyle Show. We must begin by discussing a video that has resurfaced from Mayor-elect of New York, Mamdani, who I suppose when he was campaigning, he had this advertisement where he was talking about cutting red tape surrounding businesses, regulations, things of that nature in New York. And so now we are being told that actually this is not just a continuation of the sort of Barack Hussein, Ocasio-Cortez, third worldist model of politics, which is ascendant on the left, but rather this is a guy who is actually just playing the game and being smart. And he's actually just like rug pulled his Marxist foreign base, which propelled him into office, and he's actually going to be a based and red-pilled free marketeer. And if you disagree with that, then you are simply suffering from Mamdani derangement syndrome, I was told. So just take a look at this video, and then we will give some reality-aligned takes.
There's a lot of things that make New York City special. For me, it's the delis and bodegas. Habibi, could I get an egg and cheese on a roll with jalapeno?
One Zohran special coming up.
Small businesses employ nearly half of all New Yorkers in the private sector. They keep the city running, but the last 4 years have been hard. We've seen the dollar slice go extinct, storefront after storefront close, and had a mayor in Eric Adams who has ignored the struggles of small businesses. That's why as mayor, I'm going to make it faster, easier, and cheaper for small businesses to get started and stay open. First, we're going to cut fines and fees for small businesses by 50%. Regulations are important, but small businesses have to navigate more than 6,000 of them, with far fewer resources than the big chains. That's why as mayor, I'll appoint a mom-and-pop czar with the clear goal of making it easier to run a small business. $1,000 isn't a lot to our city government, but it can be make or break for a small business trying to get off the ground. Next, we're going to accelerate permits and applications. The mom-and-pop czar will coordinate with agencies to speed up turnaround times, cut red tape, and let New Yorkers start businesses sooner. Because you shouldn't have to fill out 24 forms and go through 7 agencies to start a barbershop. But most of all, we're putting our money where our mouth is by increasing funding for small business support programs by 500%. We're going to invest $20 million in our business.
You've got the cutting of red tape, you've got the funding for these businesses, and then you've got, you know, the annoying just regulations, permits, things of that nature. So the funding, we already know where that's coming from. Literally a redistribution of wealth from the whiter neighborhoods. I'm quoting Mamdani. He wanted to raise taxes specifically on the whiter neighborhoods, even doubled down on that racially charged language to pay for these, you know, handouts to these small businesses, which, you know, I'm not even going to sit here and like make maybe principled arguments against those kinds of loans. I could. That's not what the point of concern is here. With this in particular, which is that these luxuries, of course, were not available to New Yorkers before maybe Mamdani was in office. I'm sure they were to a certain extent. But the reason he's campaigning on this and why he intends to actualize this now is less because he's actually concerned about small businesses, maybe even this like old school Democrat kind of sentiment, but more because he is simply rewarding his foreign base, which is what elected him to office. Native-born New Yorkers voted majority, I think, for Cuomo. Mamdani was literally only installed into office where he will soon be now the mayor of New York because of this foreign base. And so everybody on Twitter was like, I don't want to use the sort of like homosexual slang, but they were like glazing this guy because they thought it was like so freaking epic that he was like tricking his Marxist base and actually supporting deregulation, they called it. And so I wrote back, I was like, apparently nobody's understanding that this guy isn't accidentally like good on an issue. This is done only to make it easier for illegal aliens and other foreigners to quote unquote set up shop without having to jump through hoops. Established businesses didn't have that luxury, but now that Mamdani is going to be in office, he can increase startup cash for new businesses. Whose businesses are new? There are a lot of businesses in New York, very competitive environment. I mean, look where he's at when he's filming this commercial. He's in all of these like, you know, little hole in the wall, kind of like food service places, restaurants, bodegas, if you will. There are plenty of those. So why would there be new of these starting up? Whose businesses are, though? Who is moving to New York and starting businesses? It's obviously foreigners. Removing regulations, waiving fines for things. I'm guessing those would be things that these extremely unassimilated demographics would have no ability to do, much less interest in doing. Yeah, when he's talking about these regulations, he's not talking about like, oh, you know, if you want to install a refrigerator, you're going to need a union-approved guy to come install the refrigerator. Not those kinds of like very like Hayek or Henry Hazlitt sort of arguments. You're talking about like cleanliness standards, worker hygiene standards, temperature control, food safety standards, inspections, record keeping. These are things that you would say maybe these new demographics that are going to be moving to New York aren't exactly accustomed to, aren't exactly concerned with. The people who would be patronizing those businesses are not exactly concerned with. We know the kinds of places that they tend to live, tend to do business. So I said, because Marxism is not an ideology to people who have no intellectual history, again, you cannot intellectualize people who do not have like an intellectual basis for doing things. They simply do things, and then you, because you're an Anglo, are like, how do we intellectualize it? How do we write a paper on this? How do we have a rules-based order in this? I said, yeah, it just means free stuff and doing whatever you want. That's why the foreign-born population elected him mayor. That's what he's doing here. The absolutely last thing you need to be doing is putting less oversight and less regulation over people who are just navigating civilization for the first time. That is what is going on here. And because people are incapable of second-order thinking, because they're not intelligent, and also because they're very cucked, you know, President Trump will use the term beautiful hearts. We have a term around here that we've been using for 10 years now, which is that people are cucked, and they want to believe that the pendulum exists. They want to believe that Mamdani is going to be somehow democratically held accountable by the people, which is to say, if he goes too far in one direction, hold on there, Mamdani, we're pulling you back in. And now people are fed up, and you're going to have to become a moderate on certain issues. Or that we actually don't just have this like ascendant class of gay race communists that we're going to have to be dealing with once this model proves to be something that works to achieve office in this country as a Democrat. We're not going to have to be dealing with that. Actually, he was only leaning into that gay race communism to trick New Yorkers, and now he's going to temper and moderate his message so that he can be more moderate and actually run the city functionally. That is not actually true. The people who are voting for Mamdani, like we said, are not New Yorkers. These are not people who even understand what civilization is. These are people who see a guy who is advertising to them that he will give them free stuff and he will make it easier for them to run a business. What does that mean? Do you think that means that the government's breathing down your neck about stuff that, you know, is pretty much more or less like intuitive to how you'd be running a business? Or do you think that means people who come from countries where it's totally normal to have child labor, to have rat feces in kitchens, to be leaving food on the counter unrefrigerated, stuff like that, where in America you would have to pay a fine for that, you would have health inspectors, food inspectors, things of that nature? Do we think that that's maybe what that is? Or is he just like accidentally based on this, accidentally good on one issue? Or is it that same vector of being opposed to our civilization and wanting to help the foreigners who he relates to, who he allies with as an enemy of Western civilization, and he's just like distributing favors to them, patronage to them because they elected him? But because people are not intelligent enough to sort of understand the bird's eye of this stuff, you know, I had people, lolberts, of course, the usual suspects, getting mad. They're saying, you know, bad idea to let Zohran outflank you on deregulation. Regulation is communist central planning, cooked up during the progressive era and expanded through the Great Society. Immigration creates low trust, which leads to more demand for regulation, but socialism still doesn't work. This is not about that. You have to be 200 IQ enough to understand that in this instance, deregulation is actually Marxist in nature. Please, trust me. I said he's not outflanking anybody on anything because he's a gay race communist. And insofar as he's cutting red tape, it's to serve that end. People are incapable of seeing that because they desperately want to believe the comforting lie that we can shrink government our way out of this. And again, people did not have the 200 IQ. They were not capable of understanding the sort of 5D chess there. So they were like, you know, straw manning me in my reply saying, government regulations are good because it makes it more expensive for immigrants to open small businesses, is the galaxy brain dumb take I was not expecting to see today. I say, you are not intelligent enough to think in terms of more than one variable simultaneously. And so you see this one instance of a guy who in every other instance is a gay race communist, and you think that because he supports like very contextual deregulation, which again, I guarantee you in practice means waiving fines, like he said, those stupid fines for stuff that's like disgusting and contaminating food, things of that nature. You see this one instance, and so because you can only think in terms of one variable at a time, you think it's actually like based and red-pilled. And you are not smart enough to see that this guy who quite openly is calling for, again, more taxes on white people to fuel the other side of this whole equation. And so you think that this guy is actually like somehow based. And now you're going to be like enriched by kitchens with rat feces, food that's developing bacteria, things of that nature. And the market, by the way, doesn't solve this. The market does not solve this, not only because, one, it clearly hasn't. We've been dealing with things like this for decades anyway. But it also does not solve this because, again, who are these businesses being started by and who are they for? Who's patronizing these businesses? These businesses are being patronized by the foreigners who elected him in the first place. They don't exactly maintain cleanliness standards. They're not exactly accustomed to that. They don't really have a problem with that. And even if they did, they would still patronize these businesses simply because of ethnic nepotism. So as a result, the country, the city, everything is going to disintegrate, to degenerate into the historical mean, which is dirty and it is uncivilized by definition.